This is Revelation chapter 18, verse 1. And after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Alright, I want to say all praise Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone who rule well, and all the Akim laboring in the work, pushing out the truth. Shalom to the hopeful elect. We hasten for the return of Hamashiach, Yahweh Shai, and the establishment of righteousness on earth and the destruction of this wicked kingdom. Alright, this lesson is going to be over Revelation 18. I was doing some reading earlier in the week, and the Spirit was on me to, just go over Revelation 18. Alright, so before I get started though, as always, I want to give my disclaimer. I am not a member of Great Millstone, but those are the brothers that I listen to and I learn from. So I always want to make sure that I give them their credit and their just due. I also make that disclaimer just in case I go off on any scripture or go off in any way. I don't want the ministry to be blamed. Also, when I do these lessons, I'm speaking to you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. Those are bywords, but you are actually the children of Israel. You're the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob pursuant to prophecy. And we go by these bywords in these last days. We're also scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. So we're going to look like all the other nations because we are scattered in the other nations. But for the most part, all 12 tribes are here in America, which is Babylon the Great. Also, the name of the Heavenly Father is Yahweh. His son's name is Yahweh Shai. And you need to know those names because up on those names hang our very deliverance. Alright, so without any further ado, let's just get right into it. So this is Revelation chapter 18 and verse 1. After these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. Now, just to get some context, you have John the Revelator. He is exiled as a prisoner on the island of Patmos, and he's receiving these visions. So he's seeing visions, and as they appear, he's writing them down, and this is what he's seeing. Verse 2. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Now, I want to get some understanding on the habitation of devils and the hold of every foul spirit and unclean and hateful bird, because that is the heritage of Esau Edom. This is the heritage of Babylon the Great. This is going to be the end result of Babylon once this place is fallen, once it's actually taken down. So the first place I want to go is, this is Malachi chapter 1. So this is Malachi chapter 1, and we'll start at verse 1. It says, the burden of the word of Yahweh to Israel by Malachi. Malachi was the prophet during this time. Verse 2. I have loved you, saith Yahweh, yet ye say, wherein hast thou loved us? Was not Esau Jacob's brother, saith Yahweh, yet I love Jacob. So the Most High is saying, I love you, Israel. And even in this current time, you may think, okay, if the Most High loves us so much, then why do we go through all this hell? Well, we go through all this hell because we're under the curses. We broke our covenant with the Heavenly Father, and the Most High is a man of his word. Yet he loved us and loves us because he knew we were going to go off. Yet he already made that promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that he would bless us. And even though Esau, if you know the history, Esau was the firstborn, but he sold his birthright. So the blessing and the promise went to Jacob, and the Most High worked it that way that Esau would sell his birthright. Also, going back to when Isaac was on his deathbed in Jacob went in to receive the blessing, it was all according to the will of the Most High, because he chose Jacob. So that's what that's describing. Verse 3, and it says, and I hated Esau and laid his mountains and his heritage waste for the dragons of the wilderness. Now, this is speaking about the ultimate result for Esau Edom, the so-called white man that's running the world today. And it says he laid his mountains. His mountains are, they represent the governments of Esau Edom, the governments of these so-called white people, these so-called Europeans. And I always make this statement: you fail to realize, or you fail to draw the connection sometimes, that so-called white people in America, they are indeed Europeans. That's where they come from. And the Most High said their governments, it's not going to last forever. Their heritage is ultimately destruction, and it's going to be waste for the dragons of the wilderness. So that's what we read in Revelation chapter 18 verse 2. I'm gonna get some more scriptures. I'm just providing some edification. In verse 4 it says, whereas Edom saith, we are impoverished, but we will return and build the desolate places. And that's what they did. That's specifically going into the fall of the Roman Empire. You had the fall of the Roman Empire, then you have this period which in history is known as the Dark Ages or the Middle Ages. That was that period of time when Esau Edom was impoverished. There's also a period of time during the Babylonian, before the Babylonian Empire as well, but this is mainly speaking of those Dark Ages, because after they were impoverished, they did come back and they rebuilt. You know, the word Renaissance literally means rebirth. And from the time of the rebirth up until this very time, it's been Esau Edom that's been ruling the world, controlling the world, manipulating the world. So verse 4 at the top again, it says, whereas Edom saith, we are impoverished, but we will return and build the desolate places. Thus saith Yahweh of hosts, they shall build, and they have built, but I will throw down. And that's ultimately going to happen when he sends the Savior back, Yahweh Shai and the angels. They shall build, but I will throw down, and they shall call them the border of wickedness, the people against whom Yahweh have indignation forever. So there's no people in the Bible that the Most High has indignation against forever. Esau Edom is the curse of the Most High. This people is cursed, even though it looks like they've been blessed, and they have been blessed, but just for this period of time, because this is their heaven. That also goes back to verse 2. He hated Esau. It appears as though he gave the world to Esau, but the world is given into the hand of the wicked. But his heritage is destruction and waste. The heritage of Jacob is eternal life in the kingdom of heaven. That's the love. But the point being, in verse 3, and I hated Esau and laid his mountains and his heritage waste for the dragons of the wilderness. So let's go to, first of all, let's look up impoverished. Let's get the blue letter and let's look that word up. It means to beat down. But let's get it. What was that? Malachi 1 in verse 4. And we'll listen to the word.
Strong's H 7567. Rashash. Rashash.
And that's Rashash. Rashash. Alright, and what does it mean? To beat down, shatter. To beat down, shatter, to be beaten down. And they were beaten down after the fall of the Roman Empire. Again, you had the period of the Dark Ages. And that's when they were actually in the caves in the Caucasus Mountains. Caucasus Mountains or Caucasus Mountains. Alright, so let's go to Isaiah 34. This is Isaiah chapter 34, and we'll start at verse 5. And I'm just building some context so you have an understanding. So this is verse 5. It says, my sword shall be bathed in heaven. Behold, it shall come down upon Idumea and upon Salaki. Let me start over. Verse 5 at the top. For my sword shall be bathed in heaven. Behold, it shall come down upon Idumea and upon the people of my curse to judgment, because that is the judgment that Esau Edom has. And Idumea is just a Greek way of saying Edom. Edom is Esau. Verse 6, the sword of Yahweh is filled with blood. It is made fat with fatness, and with the blood of lambs and goats, with the fat of the kidneys of rams. For Yahweh hath a sacrifice in Basra, and a great slaughter in the land of Idumea. Now, this is the spiritual land of Idumea. And what verse 6 is describing? It's describing a process of a sacrifice. You know, you would get the fat, you would get the kidneys, the blood of the lamb, and you would make a sacrifice. This land is a sacrifice. Apostle Tahar always mentions this, that Babylon the Great, America, is nothing but an altar. It's an altar that the Most High has allowed to be established upon the earth to reach this great degree of prestige among the world and power and influence, only to be made an example out of. And it's going to be a sacrifice, a burnt sacrifice. So that's what verse 6 is describing. Verse 7, and the unicorn shall come down with them, and the bullocks with the bulls, and their land shall be soaked with blood, and their dust made fat with fatness. Verse 8, for it is the day of Yahweh's vengeance, and the year of recompense for the controversy of Zion. Now, what is the controversy of Zion? It's the fact that you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, you are really the children of Israel. That's the controversy. See, in every captivity we've been in, we have always known our identity. We've always known that we were the children of Israel. Now, we were going off. We were worshiping other gods. We were wicked. We were sinning. But just as the Most High prophesied that we were going to eventually lose our heritage, and we lost it. We didn't know we was Israelites. We didn't know that the Bible was actually talking about us. This is our history. This is our heritage. We didn't know that the Most High, that we are actually the Most High's people. This is the controversy of Zion. And really, you know, it was the Greeks that really started that, because they didn't want the Israelites to practice their religion, their customs. You know, they really started to Hellenize the Israelites. You know, it's the same thing you have here as far as like the term Americanize, or the Americanization of these other countries where they become more like America. You had that began with the Greeks, but they did it on a whole nother level, where they were actually trying to, you know, move us away from our heritage. That was the beginning of it. You fast forward in history, during the slave trade, they actually beat our identity out of us, separated the families, wouldn't allow us to read, and that's when we truly lost the heritage. All right, so that's the controversy of Zion. Verse 9 and 10 is really the point. Verse 9, and the streams thereof shall be turned into pitch, and the dust thereof into brimstone, and the land thereof shall become burning pitch. Now that pitch is tar. Verse 10, it shall not be quenched night nor day, the smoke thereof shall go up forever. From generation to generation it shall lie waste. None shall pass through it forever and forever. Verse 11. Salakia, the point was in verse 11. But the cormorant and the bittern shall pass it. Salakia, shall possess it. The owl also and the raven shall dwell in it. And he shall stretch out upon it the line of confusion and the stones of emptiness. So verse 9, verse 10, and verse 11 is describing what we read in verse 2 of Revelation chapter 18. This place is going to be destroyed. The land is going to be pitch, like tar. That's burning pitch. That is the lake of fire. This place is going to be a lake of fire. And it's saying the smoke of it is going to be forever. Now, it's not a literal forever, because how do we know that? In verse 11, we just read that this place is going to be inhabited by the bittern, the cormorant, which is like an egret, and the owl, because this place is going to be inhabited by those foul spirits and those unclean and hateful birds. It's going to burn for a period of time. And, you know how long that period of time is? We don't know. It's going to burn for a long, long time. Afterwards, once the fire subsides and the smoke subsides, Eventually, you're going to have desert creatures that move into this place, Babylon the Great. But no man is ever going to dwell here. So let's start at verse 9 and read down to 11 again. It says, and the streams thereof shall be turned into pitch. So all the water, all the rivers, the lakes, they're going to be dried up. And the dust thereof into brimstone. And the land thereof shall become burning pitch. Verse 10, it shall not be quenched night nor day. The smoke thereof shall go up forever. From generation to generation it shall lie waste. That's the heritage of who? Because you leave a heritage to the next generation. So from generation to generation it shall lie waste. That is the heritage of Esau Edom, Babylon the Great. None shall possess it forever and ever. Verse 11, but the cormorant and the bittern shall possess it. The owl also, the raven shall dwell in it. And the raven shall dwell in it. And he shall stretch out upon it the line of confusion and the stones of emptiness. So you pretty much got the point. Let's go to, let me see if I want to jump down. Yeah, let me just go ahead and read on down too. Because how let's just read on. So this is verse 12. They shall call the nobles thereof to the kingdom, but none shall be there, and all her princes shall be nothing, because the kings, the governor, well, kings will be your president, your rulers, and princes will be, governors, mayors, so forth and such. Verse 13, and thorns shall come up in her palaces, nettles and brambles in the fortresses thereof, and it shall be an habitation of dragons and a court of owls. So yes, it's good that I continue to read this verse. So let's go back to 18 right quick. Revelations 18, and we're gonna come back here. This is Revelation 18, chapter 2. Salakia, chapter 2, verse 2. Salakia, this is Revelation chapter 18, verse 2. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, same thing as dragons, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Now, I'm going to mention this too. Apostle Tahar made a great point before. When you talk about these foul spirits, in these Middle Eastern countries, they got a lot of legends about genies. Now, jinn, which is a genie, is mentioned in the scriptures, and those are just spirits. So this place is going to indeed be inhabited by those same evil spirits and these birds. So let's go back to Isaiah 34 and verse 13. And thorns shall come up in her palaces, because it's going to be overgrown with thorns. You see movies like what's the name of that movie? I Am Legend. How all the buildings got trees and bushes all throughout them are overgrown or overgrowing these different dwelling places. The only difference is none of that stuff is even going to exist, because the scriptures tell you that the elements are going to be melted with fervent heat. So all of that is going to be destroyed. It's going to be burnt. That's why it's going to be burnt, and it's going to be burnt for a long time. And in the places of those houses or these government buildings, you're going to have thorns and brambles. And thorns shall come up in her palaces, nettles and brambles in the fortresses thereof, and it shall be an habitation of dragons and a court for owls. Verse 14. The wild beasts of the desert shall also meet with the wild beasts of the islands, and the satyr shall cry to his fellow. The screech owl also shall rest there, and find for herself a place to rest. Now, how are these desert creatures going to get here? The scriptures tell you that the mountains and the islands are going to be moved out of their places. So this place, Babylon the Great, America, is going to be utterly destroyed, utterly burnt up. Man and beast in this place are going to be destroyed. All the structures, cars, signs, all that shit is going to be destroyed as well. Eventually, at some point, you're going to have these desert creatures that move in, and that's how they're going to move in. Actually, let's get that in Revelations 6 and 14. This is Revelations chapter 6, verse 14. And it says, "And the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together." Now that's describing the mushroom cloud, because that's what's going to bring about this destruction. Those ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. So that is what Revelation chapter 18 verse 2 is describing. Also, just to show, the parallel between Esau, Edom, or Idumea, and Babylon the Great, let's go to Jeremiah 49. So this is Jeremiah chapter 49 verse 20. And then we're going to go to Jeremiah 50 and 45. And it's going to parallel in its statement. So this is Jeremiah chapter 49 verse 20. "Therefore hear the counsel of Yahweh that he hath taken against Edom, and his purposes that he hath purposed against the inhabitants of Teman. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. Surely he shall make their habitation desolate with them." Now, I'm going to not break it down, but give some edification on it. This is obviously talking about Esau, Edom, the land of Idumea, which is America today. Spiritually, this is this place today. Now, when it's saying against the inhabitants of Teman, first of all, it's like, let's read Jeremiah 50. It'll make sense. So this is Jeremiah chapter 50 verse 45. It says, and it's going to read the same way: "Therefore hear ye the counsel of Yahweh that he hath spoken against Babylon, and his purposes that he hath purposed against the land of the Chaldeans. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. Surely he shall make their habitation desolate with them." So first, that's the parallel between Esau, Edom, Idumea, and Babylon the Great. They're the same spiritually. The same words that were prophesied against them are going to take place in this current Babylon the Great. Now, what I want to make mention of, it says, "He have purposed against the land of the Chaldeans." The Chaldeans were just the wise men of the Babylonians. They were the wise men. They were the sorcerers. They were the soothsayers. This is the same thing that's being described here in Jeremiah 49 verse 20. It says, "Therefore hear the counsel of Yahweh that he hath taken against Edom, and his purposes, and he hath purposed against the inhabitants of Teman." Teman is just another tribe of Esau, Edom. Through the Spirit, these are identified as the Germans, because the Germans are the wisest of the Edomites. And I know this personally. Anytime I'm doing a lesson, well, not every single time, but most times I'm doing a lesson and I'm going through any type of history, whether it's a philosophy that began, in the 1700s or 1800s or whatever the case may be, or if it's for some type of technology, it always goes back to some German. Even the Bavarian Illuminati started in 1776. Bavaria was a province in Germany. Even what you got going on today with the pandemic, the Max, one of the companies, Pfizer. I was just doing a little research on Pfizer, and guess what? Those founders are two German brothers. And you go back to, again, when you start doing any type of research, it is not like I'm trying to see, if it's going to lead back to teaming. I'm just trying to get information so I can, bring forth a lesson to make sure I know what I'm talking about and to make sure it's edifying. But it never fails. It always goes back to some German. These are the wise men. Think about the technology that the Russians and Americans, took from the Germans after World War II. So that's what that's describing. But the point I wanted to make was that you can see the parallels. And when it says the least of the flock shall draw them out, that's talking about the Amalekites, another tribe of Esau, Edom. And that's talking about the so-called you-know-who's, you-know-where. Because they're the least. But somehow or another, they're going to be the cause of World War III. This is what this is describing. The least of the flock shall draw them out. They're going to make America, Babylon the Great, Esau, Edom get involved in some type of dispute, which is going to lead to World War III, the ultimate destruction. So that's what's being described right here. One more thing on this point. In Jeremiah 50, if you jump back up to 38, I'm just going to read it right quick. This is dealing with Babylon. It says, a drought is upon her waters, and they shall be dried up, for it is the land of graven images, and they are mad upon their idols. Now, when it's saying a drought in this particular verse, it's not talking about a drought like, might take place on a farmland. It's talking about the water actually being dried up through fire, being burnt, just like what was described in Jeremiah Isaiah 34. When it's saying the streams are going to be dried up and turned to pitch, this is what that's describing. A drought is upon her waters, and they shall be dried up, for it is the land of graven images. They are mad upon their idols. And this place here, these people in America, they are mad about their idols. Whether it's Jake, Esau, Edom, all the other nations. And people may not be physically bowing down to idols, but they still worship idols, whether it's money, whether it's women, whether it's sex, whether it's worshiping themselves, whether it's chasing this American dream, being successful, whether it's literal witchcraft or any other, false religions that people are worship. People are mad about it here. Verse 39, therefore the wild beast of the desert and the wild beast of the islands shall dwell there, and the owl shall dwell therein, and it shall be no more inhabited forever, neither shall it be dwelt in from generation to generation. So that should be crystal clear. So let's read it from the top again, and then we'll go down. So this is Revelation chapter 18, verse 1. And after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. So that's why that is written, because the Most High prophesied it in ancient times that was going to be the heritage for Babylon the Great. That was going to be the heritage for Esau, Edom. Verse 3. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. Now, this is also one way, and I'm not going to deviate, but I'm going to make mention of it. This is also just one way that the Roman Catholic Church is not Babylon the Great. No, the countries of the world have not been made great through the Roman Catholic Church. They've been made great through specifically Babylon the Great, America. Now, when it's saying drunk of all the wine, that wine is going into all these false religions, all these false doctrines, all these policies, whether it's, democracy in these other countries, giving women rights. When I say giving women rights, it comes off as if it might put a bad taste in your mouth, but giving women rights is giving them liberty to do everything that they do. And it's just not just women, but that's just part of it. Homosexuality, greed, the militarization of the world. People are focusing more on their militaries than, trying to take care of the people of their nation. All this wine That's what that fornication is, and that fornication is spiritual fornication, because they're in bed with America, Babylon the Great, some way or another. If they're not in directly, America may influence one country to enact trades, with another country, or so forth and so on. You know how this works. Another point I wanted to make out too, with this verse, you got to understand. And I thought about this, and I put a little video in here I'm going to show. It's not the video I'm about to explain. Now, a while back, a few years ago, I was just watching a video on how, these Middle Eastern countries became rich. When America came there and started, doing business with them for their oil. These were just regular tribesmen. They were just regular tribesmen. You still had, your kings and your princes, but it wasn't like a king or a prince, what you see today. When you imagine these Middle Eastern kings or sheiks and princes, you imagine these extravagant palaces. You imagine 10 Bugattis and 20 Lamborghinis and yachts. It was nothing like that. The primary trade for those Middle Eastern countries before the discovery of oil there was through tourism. You would have people that would come in from different parts of the world. They might stop in this country for a night, stop at this location for a night to go see, the mosque, the Dome of the Rock, I can't think of what that cube is called. But it was tourism. But then once they started doing business for the oil, it changed into what you see today. This is why people, you hear, especially, Jake women talking about they want to go to Dubai, because they see these other superstars, movie celebrities going to Dubai. But that's just an example of, countries and nations being made rich through her abundance of delicacies. It was through that trade. Think about China. China became a superpower because of the trade that it was doing with America, as well as these other European countries, but it was mainly through America. Everything is made in damn China. It's through trade. So let's read this again. I'm gonna watch a little, and then we'll watch a little short video. Verse 3, for all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. And again, it's through trade, it's through political policies, it's through military strategic outposts, false governments, proxy wars, puppet leaders, all of that shit, trade and all the political stuff behind it. That's what that's talking about. So let's watch this clip. I couldn't find that video I was talking about with the documentary going over how America and these Middle Eastern countries became what they are today through the discovery of oil. And it was a long video anyway. I wasn't gonna put that in here, but I might have picked out a clip or whatever. But I did get a video just to give you a brief understanding of how they work. Now this is it's only 6 minutes long, and then we'll watch another one.
Iranian technicians are developing skills to operate complex
After years of exploration, the British finally struck oil in modern-day Iran in 1908. The following year, the Anglo-Persian Oil Company was established. Public shares in the company sold out in half an hour, securing Britain a guaranteed source of oil from the Middle East. In the early 20th century, industry was shifting from reliance on coal to oil fuel. Before this, industrial nations largely relied on domestic coal reserves. They now had to increasingly look to foreign oil sources. In 1912, the Turkish Petroleum Company was founded in Turkish-occupied Iraq, restricting access to the market to a limited group of British, German and Turkish oil companies. control of and access to Middle East oil reserves was a major factor in the mounting tensions behind the First World War, with Germany challenging British interests in Iraq. After the war, the balance of Middle East power shifted in favour of the United States, who had ensured Allied victory. By 1920, the US provided over 60% of the world's oil supply. Outside of the US, however, the British either owned, controlled or financed all known oil fields. However, the British were persuaded it would be better to join forces with American oil companies than exacerbate tensions between the two powers. Driven by the discovery of oil in Iraq, the 1928 Red Line Agreement between Britain, France and America officially made the TPC, now the Iraqi Petroleum Company, a cartel. In 1929, the US set up the Bahrain Petroleum Corporation and in 1933 bought drilling rights from Saudi Arabia. The discovery of oil there in 1938 was described as the single greatest prize in all history. That year also saw oil discovered in Kuwait. Economic competition, especially the rise of German imperialism, led to the Second World War. By now, oil was vital to military operations and became central to the post-war economic boom. After Iran's democratic government nationalised British oil interests, Britain and the CIA helped engineer a coup in 1953 which created a dictatorship. In 1973, OPEC, an oil production cartel including Iran, Iraq and Saudi Arabia, flexed its muscles. It announced an oil embargo in response to the Arab-Israeli war and sparked a financial crisis. In response, in 1975, the US assessed the feasibility of the use of US military force to occupy foreign oil fields in exigency. The 1979 Iranian Revolution was a further blow to US oil interests, and with the invasion of Kuwait in 1990, Iraq, once a Western ally, gained access to 20% of the world's known oil supplies. This was a major motivation behind the First Gulf War. Despite the emergence of significant oil fields outside of the Middle East, by the turn of the 21st century, most known reserves lay in the region. By then, the US had built up a massive military presence and led an alliance of states including Israel, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey and the UAE. Although some claim that the 2003 Iraq War was about democracy, many saw it as a continuation of a Western foreign policy based on strategic control of oil in the Middle East. Some saw the Arab Spring of 2011 as a major threat to foreign control of oil, by raising the possibility that its production would come under democratic control.
Alright, so that was a little first clip. And this says events that changed the world. Now, you can go back and watch this, but you notice at the beginning, it's showing you, drawings or pictures of Esau, Edom, and some other land causing some event. Some world event that caused some type of change throughout the world. It's Esau, Edom. This is the devil. This is the man whose blessing is the sword. Sword is any type of weapons. This is the red horse in Revelation chapter 6. He has taken peace from the earth through everything he does. It has led to nothing but disorder, and it's eventually leading to World War III. It already led to 2 wars. Just something I wanted to point out here. Let's watch this next video.
The modern United States is the most powerful country in human history, with over 800 military bases and 37% of global military spending. The US has become the leader of a vast, interconnected global system that has helped usher in an era of unprecedented prosperity and low levels of conflict. To understand America's position in the world, and why it's so pivotal for world politics as we know it, you have to go back to the country's founding, back to when America wasn't a global power in any sense of the word. During the first 70 years of its existence, the United States expanded in both territory and influence in North America, eventually reaching the Pacific Ocean, in a wave of expansionism that resulted in the wholesale slaughter of the indigenous people who populated the continent. But early Americans were deeply divided as to whether the country should expand beyond the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. This became a major debate after the Civil War, when some leaders, like post-war Secretary of State Seward, argued that America should push to become a global power. Seward succeeded in pushing a plan to purchase Alaska from Russia, but his attempts to buy Greenland and Iceland, as well as annexed territory in the Caribbean, were all blocked by Congress. That's because some Americans, including many on Capitol Hill, had a strong anti-imperialist bent. These people worried about America getting more involved in global politics, as well as having to integrate populations from quote-unquote inferior races. And this opposition implied major checks on the imperialist urge to expand. But something was happening in the late 1800s that would change the debate about American expansionism. The Industrial Revolution produced explosive economic growth, and the bigger US economy required a more centralized state and bureaucracy to manage the growing economy. Power became concentrated in the federal government, making it easier for expansionist presidents, like William McKinley, to unilaterally push American influence abroad. The key turning point came in 1898, when President McKinley dragged the country into war with Spain over Cuba, despite some intense domestic opposition. The rising United States easily defeated the moribund Spanish Empire, acquiring Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines in the process. Over the next 2 years, the US would annex the Kingdom of Hawaii, Wake Island, and American Samoa. A few years later, the US took control of the Panama Canal Zone and sent troops to occupy the Dominican Republic. It also purchased the American Virgin Islands. This period of rapid acquisition of far-flung territories put the US on the map as a truly global power. During this time, America also began using its influence to protect its growing commercial and military interests abroad, installing pro-American regimes in places like Nicaragua, and playing a major role in international diplomacy regarding the Western presence in China. World War I showed just how much America's influence had grown. Not only was American intervention a decisive factor in the war's end, but President Wilson attended the Paris Peace Conference, which ended the war, and attempted to set the terms of the peace. He spearheaded America's most ambitious foreign policy initiative yet, an international organization called the League of Nations, designed to promote peace and cooperation globally. The League, a wholesale effort to remake global politics, showed just how ambitious American foreign policy had become. Yet isolationism was still a major force in the United States. Congress blocked the United States from joining the League of Nations, dooming Wilson's project. During the Great Depression and the rise of Hitler, the US was much more focused on its own region than on European affairs. Ultimately, America's ever-growing entanglements abroad made it impossible for it to stay out of global affairs entirely. In East Asia, the growing Japanese Empire posed a direct threat to American possessions and troops, bringing the United States and Japan into conflict. This culminated in the Pearl Harbor attack, bringing the United States into World War II. World War II would transform America's global presence forever. The United States was the only major power to avoid economic ruin during the war, and it was the sole country equipped with atomic weapons. As such, it was in a unique position to set the terms of the peace, and, with the aim of preventing another war in mind, it took advantage. The most famous example of this is the creation of the United Nations. The UN Charter set up a system of international law prohibiting wars of conquest, like the ones waged by the Nazis and the Japanese. It also served as a forum in which the international community could weigh in on disputes and help resolve them. This way, the Americans hoped, great powers could resolve their differences through compromise and law rather than war. But while the UN is the most famous of the post-war institutions, it isn't the only one. 730 delegates from all 44 allied nations came together in a small vacation haven in New Hampshire. Their goal? To establish a global financial system that would prevent another Great Depression and World War. The resulting agreement, called the Bretton Woods Agreement, ultimately became the backbone of the global financial system, resulting in the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. By creating these institutions, the United States committed itself to being deeply involved in the world's problems. The issue, though, is that the world's second largest power, the Soviet Union, saw things differently. World War II had made allies out of the democratic West and communist East in the fight against Hitler, but that couldn't last. The United States saw Soviet expansion in Eastern Europe and elsewhere as a direct threat to its vision of a free-trading, democratic world.
To a substantial degree, in one form or another, socialism has spread the shadow of human regimentation over most of the nations of the earth, and the shadow is encroaching upon our own liberty.
Fearful of Soviet intentions towards Western Europe, the US and other European nations created the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, a military alliance meant to stop Russia from invading other countries in Europe. Globally, the US committed to a strategy called containment, so called because it was aimed at containing the spread of communism everywhere on the globe. This new global struggle meant that the US had to exert influence everywhere, all the time. Instead of disbanding the massive military machine created for World War II, the wheels mostly kept turning. This had two main results. First, the US was pulled into unlikely alliances with countries like Saudi Arabia, Israel, and South Korea, seeing each of them as bulwarks against communist influence in their region. Secondly, the US began intervening, often secretly, in dozens of countries to contain Soviet influence. Sometimes this meant propping up sympathetic dictators, like in Iran. Other times, it meant supplying rebels with arms and money, like in Afghanistan in 1979 and Nicaragua in 1985. Over the course of the Cold War, the US intervened in hundreds of disputes around the globe, ending up with a complicated set of alliances, tensions, and relationships in basically every corner of the Earth. After the Berlin Wall fell, the US could have withdrawn from the system, severing ties with its allies and drawing down the size of its military. And while the US did decrease military spending, much of the military infrastructure and alliances from the Cold War remained. Presidents George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton decided that it was in both America and the world's interests for the United States, now the sole superpower on Earth, to continue actively managing global affairs.
We should be and we must be peacemakers.
NATO, created solely as a tool for countering the Soviet Union, stayed together and even expanded, a way of keeping European nations united in the absence of the Soviet threat. Washington's support for countries like Israel and Japan stayed intact, ostensibly as a means of preventing war in their respective regions. The global system of alliances and institutions created to keep the peace during the Cold War became permanent, as did the American military and political commitments necessary to keep them running. This system remains in operation today, and no leading American politician since the Cold War has seriously called for dismantling it. Except, perhaps, for Donald Trump. Trump has said contradictory things about these commitments, but he's consistently argued that American allies are not paying the US enough for its protection, and questioned the value of free trade. That calls NATO and even the World Trade Organization into question.
At some point, we have to say, you know what, we're better off if Japan protects itself against this maniac in North Korea. We're better off, frankly, if South Korea is going to start to protect itself.
Saudi Arabia, nuclear weapons?
Saudi Arabia, absolutely.
This is a sharp divergence from the consensus that has dominated US foreign policy since 1945, and something closer to the isolationism that came before it. So will President Trump act on some of candidate Trump's ideas and reverse decades worth of institution building and alliances? We'll find out soon enough.
Alright, that was the point of that video. And at the end, it kind of went into Donald Trump. Obviously, it's an older video. I think this is in 2016. But you get the point. Whether it's through trade, whether it's through military occupation, whether it's through, political alliances. All these nations have somehow or some way fornicated, laid in the bed with America, whether directly or indirectly. Now, I wanted to make 2 points. Let's go back. I wanted to make 2 points. Russians are Edomites. All these so-called white people, and when I say so-called white people, for the most part, they are Edomites. Now you're gonna have, I have to make sure I mention this. You're gonna have some Edomites or some people who look white, but their lineage actually goes back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, one of the 12 tribes of Israel. But again, we're scattered. Same thing. You're gonna have some so-called blacks or so-called Mexicans that look to be of Israel, but their lineage actually goes back to Esau, Edom. But for the most part, we're speaking in general terms. These so-called white people, Europeans, they're Edomites, and the Russians are Edomites as well. The only thing is, they're not part of this beast system. This beast system is America, NATO, and the EU. They're not part of the beast system, but they're still Edomites, and they're going to be destroyed just like the rest of the Edomites. They're going to be taken down. That's why the scriptures tell you, that's why Yahweh Shai said, a kingdom or divided against itself cannot stand. And that could be internally, like what you see with America. You see, the Republicans, the Democrats, the Max, the Unmax, the liberals, the conservatives. Same thing with these EU countries, these members of NATO. They're not all in agreement with each other. And beyond that, the two most powerful Edomite countries, being America and Russia, they don't agree on anything. So that's how that destruction is going to come to play. Anyway, so you should get the general idea of what's being described here. So verse 3 again, for all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. So through all that trade, through all that negotiation, through all those alliances being made, a lot of these countries are made rich or poor depending on how well they play with America. And it's not just oil, and it's not just trade with China. It's other things, other natural resources, gold, plutonium, uranium, tungsten, anything, all of that stuff. Verse 4, it says, another thing I want to make mention of, I'm not going to go into it, but keep in mind, the United Nations is in America. The International Monetary Fund is in America, the IMF. You got the phrase, all roads lead to Rome. Well, America is Rome reborn. Just something to keep in mind. Verse 4. And I heard a voice, Salakia, and I heard another voice. Let me make sure you can see that. Oh, it's all good. All right, Revelation chapter 18, verse 4. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. Now, this is going to be a literal thing. It's going to physically happen. This is speaking about, there's going to be a voice that, lets the elect know that they getting ready to get beamed up. And we're going to come out of Babylon physically. Now, I have to get this right quick so there's some edification. This is Jeremiah 51 and verse 6. Jeremiah 51 verse 6. It says, flee out of the midst of Babylon and deliver every man his soul. Be not cut off in her iniquity, for this is the time of Yahweh's vengeance, and he will render unto her a recompense. This is a spiritual fleeing. This is what we're supposed to be doing now. We're supposed to be coming out of Babylon mentally and spiritually, disassociating ourselves from the ways of this world, associating ourselves with the ways of Yahweh by Hashem Yahweh Shai in the scriptures. This is what we're supposed to be doing. We ain't supposed to be following after the lust of this world, chasing women, chasing money, chasing the American dream, worshiping these other gods, being homosexuals, and that's just a few things. Just being involved in this world. We live in the world. Don't get me wrong, we live in the world, but we're not supposed to be of the world. This is what this is talking about. Revelation 18 and 4, that's speaking about when the chariots come to actually deliver us from this place. This is read this again at the top. Revelation 18 verse 4. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. What plagues? This is Zechariah chapter 14 verse 12. And this shall be the plague wherewith Yahweh will smite all the people that have fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall consume away while they stand upon their feet, and their eyes shall consume away in their holes, and their tongue shall consume away in their mouth. That's the plague. So the Most High is going to tell us to come out of Babylon the Great, physically being beamed up, so we don't receive of these plagues. I always play these two images, just showing what these plagues are. And then this one here. And let me read this again, verse 12. And this shall be the plague wherewith Yahweh will smite all the people that have fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall consume away while they stand upon their feet, and their eyes shall consume away in their holes, and their tongue shall consume away in their mouth. That's the plague. Now, how are we going to escape that plague? Let's go to Isaiah. This is Isaiah chapter 26 and verse 20. It says, Come, my people, enter thou into thy chambers, and shut thy doors about thee. Hide thyself as it were for a little moment, until the indignation be overpast. That indignation is those nuclear bombs dropping, that destruction. It's going to be it's definitely going to be those nukes, but it also might be, fire and brimstone. It's going to be the lasers from the chariots. How do we know that? Because the scriptures tell us in Revelation 17 that these nations are going to try to fight the Lamb when he comes. So and we have to get delivered out of here before this destruction happens. How else we going to make it? So while we're being delivered, that's when Yahweh Shai and the angels return. When he returns, these other nations are going to see him, and they're going to make war with him, with the Lamb. And he's going to destroy them. Destroy them with what? He's going to destroy them with something. He's going to be shooting not nuclear, but lasers out. Lasers just concentrated energy. Fire, concentrated fire. Verse 21. For behold, Yahweh cometh out of his place to punish the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquity. The earth also shall disclose her blood, and shall no more cover her slain. So this scripture is saying, come into your chambers and shut your door until the indignation be overpassed, because the Most High is coming to punish the inhabitants of the earth. What chambers? What doors? It's a parable. It's a dark saying. It's the chariots. It's saying hide yourself in the chariots. And it's not like we really gonna have a choice. The Most High is gonna beam his elect men and the women up into the chariots, and they're going to be safe from the destruction. And it says, hide thyself for a little moment. Again, that's that period of time, because when these nuclear weapons go off, you're going to have nuclear fallout. It's going to be destruction, here and there, fire here and there. So it's going to be a while before that stuff, like the fire and stuff, subsides. So we're going to be in those chariots for a period of time. What that period of time is, we don't know. But it's just for a little moment until everything is overpassed. And then we coming back down in those glorified bodies. And we're going to take these other nations captives. They're going to be our captives. All right, so let's go back to Revelation. We left off at 4, so I'll read 4 again. This is Revelation chapter 18, verse 4. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. So let me check something right quick. All right, verse 4 again. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. Verse 5. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and the Most High hath remembered her iniquities. All this stuff that's going on, you got to be out of your mind as you think the Most High is going to allow this shit to go on forever. This place is wicked. You are out of your mind to be looking for some type of future in this place. The scriptures tell you this place is not going to be healed. It's going to be destroyed. Verse 6. Reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her double according to her works. And the cup which she hath filled to her double. So she's going to get double of what she's put on the earth. all the hell she's brought on the earth, she's gonna get double that. Verse 7. How much she hath glorified herself and lived deliciously. So much torment and sorrow give her. For she said in her heart, I sit a queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. Because there's been no war to actually come to this land. You know, you had the the French American War, the Spanish American War, then you have the Revolution. But in modern times, there's been no real war, like a destroying type of war. And those previous wars were really taking place so America could be set up. That's why a lot of these places throughout America, they either got French names, they got British names, or English names, or Spanish names, because out of those countries was America born. Alright, where we at? Verse 7 again. How much she hath glorified herself and lived deliciously. So much torment and sorrow give her. For she said in her heart, I sit a queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. Verse 8. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death, and mourning, and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire. For strong is the Lord power who judgeth her. She is going to be utterly burned with fire. This is what we keep speaking of. This is why this place is going to be burning pitch. There's not going to be any inhabitants here. It's not going to be like you see in these movies, these today showing, say there's a nuclear war or whatever, and America is destroyed, but you got some people trying to run and escape, and they might be saved, or you got some people in these bunkers. A lot of people are destroyed, but some people are making it. That's not going to be the case. If you don't make it on the chariots, you in America, you're going to be destroyed. Now, there's going to be other places that are destroyed as well, but America is going to be utterly destroyed. So is the land of Israel, because that land has to be purged for all the wickedness. All right, so America is going to be utterly destroyed. So I'm gonna make a quick point. Let's go to Daniel's. I got a habit of putting S's on the books of the Bible that just show my country. But anyway, so this is Daniel chapter 5 verse 24. Babylon the Great was never destroyed. It was never destroyed. Described how it was never destroyed with the description of how the Most High said He's going to destroy it, because that was saved for a future Babylon, a future prophecy, a future time. This time that we're living in right now. So this is Daniel chapter 5, and this is verse 24. I'm gonna read it and I'll explain it. So this is 24. It says, "Then was the part of the hand sent from him, and this writing was written." It says, "And this is the writing that was written, many tekel upharsin. And this is the interpretation of the thing, many. The Most High hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Tekel, thou art weighed in the balance and art found wanting. Peres, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians." Salakia. Verse 29. "Then commanded Belshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet, and put a chain of gold about his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him, that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom." Verse 30. "In that night was Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, slain." Verse 31. "And Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old." So what is this being described? First of all, let me just address the main point. Babylon was never destroyed. It was taken over by or absorbed by the Medo-Persian Empire. You had a progression of empires, which was described in Daniel 2 and in Daniel chapter 7, beginning with the Babylonian Empire, the Medo-Persian Empire, the Greek Empire, and then the Roman Empire. The Medo-Persian Empire was the next empire to rule after the Babylonians. The Medo-Persian Empire was a dual empire with the Medes and the Persians. This is Darius the Mede. He took the kingdom. It was never destroyed the way the Most High said Babylon the Great was going to be destroyed. He took the kingdom. Basically what was happening here, Belshazzar, he had a feast with his with 1,000 princes, and they took the holy vessels of the Most High out, and they were using them to drink. You know, they were partying. They were basically defiling these holy vessels. Now these vessels they were in their possession because Nebuchadnezzar had taken the children of Israel captive, and they had their items in possession. But anyway, he was defiling these holy items, and there was a hand that came out of thin air and wrote on the wall, "Many, many tekel upharsin." And you got the interpretation. It says you've been weighed in the balance and been found wanting, meaning you lacking. And this is where the phrase "the handwriting is on the wall" comes from. So that's what's being described. And in that same night, Darius the Mede took the kingdom. He did a surgical strike. He killed the king and had his princess king, and then they just took over. They just ruled Babylon. They made it a part of the Medo-Persian Empire. It was never destroyed in the sense that, you know, America Babylon the Great is going to be destroyed. All right. So how is America going to be destroyed? This is let's go back to Revelation 18 right quick. So this is Revelation 18. Verse 8, therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burnt with fire, for strong is Yahweh, the Lord God, who judgeth her. All right, now let's go to Jeremiah. This is Jeremiah chapter 50. I got one, but we're going to start at 13. This is Jeremiah chapter 50, verse 13. It says, because of the wrath of Yahweh, it shall not be inhabited. This is talking about Babylon. But it shall be wholly desolate. That's there for a reason. Holy, the whole place. It's going to be utterly burnt. We start again at the top. Because of the wrath of Yahweh, it shall not be inhabited, but it shall be wholly desolate. Everyone that goeth by Babylon shall be astonished and hiss at her plagues. Now, when it's saying people that go by, it's not talking about people coming here, because nobody's going to ever inhabit this land. I mean, you got to understand, you know, after things calm down, the kingdom of heaven is going to be established on earth. It's going to be a government. You know, life is still going to go on the earth. It's just that we're going to be in rulership, starting with Yahweh Shah. You know, you still going to have trade. You know, you still gonna have, you know, movement of the people after a period of time. And just like you got ships these days, anybody that's on a ship, you know, sailing by, going to another country for whatever means, they're gonna look at this place and be like, damn, what the hell happened now? or even the Israelites, you know, we're gonna have chariots too. We might be flying over this place, you know, talking with our kids, explaining to them what happened. And they're going to hiss at it. Because of the wrath of Yahweh, it shall not be inhabited, but it shall be wholly desolate. Everyone that goeth by Babylon shall be astonished and hiss at all her plagues. The point is at verse 14. Put yourselves in array against Babylon round about. That's war. All around Babylon. All ye that bend the bow, shoot at her, spare no arrows, for she hath sinned against Yahweh. That never happened. That's talking about the future. All the countries that are round about, any of them that got bows, and what is the current bow? It's ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles. Any nation that is capable of shooting a nuclear missile or an intercontinental ballistic missile over here, they're going to shoot them. Because the Most High is going to make something happen. How it's going to play out, we don't know. Well, we know how it's going to play out. The particulars of what's going to set it off, that's to be determined. You know, we're going to have to live and see that. But something is going to happen, and these countries are going to turn on America, and they're going to shoot all of them roundabout. Now let's go to Obadiah. This is Obadiah chapter 1, verse 7. And this is, let's start at verse 6. It says, how are the things of Esau searched out? How are his hidden things sought up? Verse 7. All the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee. There is none understanding in him. So what is that describing? All the nations that are in league, these EU countries, these EU nations, these NATO members, all the countries that are in league with America, they're going to turn on her, and they're going to shoot their missiles over here at her. That's why all the nations that are round about are going to be destroyed. That's why America is going to be destroyed in 1 hour. Let's get Revelation 17 right quick. It say the same thing. Revelation 17. You know, we go to these verses a lot, but the scriptures never change. The scriptures always say what they say, and it's always for edification. And these are the times that we're living in. So this is Revelation chapter 17. And I start at verse 12. And it says, and the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but received power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. That's going into these NATO, specifically the original NATO members, but all these European countries that are members of the EU and NATO. And how are they going to give their power to the beast? This beast is this system, this revised Roman system that's ruling the world, and they're giving their power to it through their policies, through their mandates, through their military. That's how they're giving their strength and power to it. Verse 14. These shall make war with the Lamb. These shall make war with the Lamb. These nations are going to make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. Verse 15. And he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. Now the whore is Babylon the Great. If you start at the top, it's describing who the whore is. And she's sitting on the nation. She's sitting over the sea, because she's ruling over all the people. The sea are the people. Verse 16. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, Salakia, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. It should be crystal clear. Why? Verse 17. For the Most High hath put it, Salakia, for the Most High hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will and to agree and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of Yahweh shall be fulfilled. It's the Most High that's making all this happen. He just giving us the understanding of what's happening, what's going to happen. And because he's given us the spirit to understand, to prophesy, we go out and prophesy, teach and show, and try to bid as many as we can to the marriage. This destruction is coming. You know, it's always a good opportunity to prophesy the destruction of Babylon the Great, because this place is wicked. We don't want this place to continue. This shit, this place just really just make you sick, man. People binary. Women don't want men no more. All the damn murdering, drugs, all the lies. Ain't no damn truth in this place except through the scriptures. Drugs, sickness, poverty. You know, people just not in their right mind. Oppression. This place gotta go. Alright, let's go back to Revelation 18. This is Revelation 18. I'm gonna start back at 8. And it says, therefore shall her plagues come in one day. That's how it's gonna happen in one day. Because all the nations that are capable of shooting weapons over here are going to shoot them. If they can shoot the bow, they gonna shoot it. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burnt with fire. For strong is the Lord power who judgeth her. Verse 9. And the kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her shall bewail her and lament for her when they shall see the smoke of her burning. Now, that's not anybody with any common sense or anybody that has traveled, and you don't necessarily have to travel. You should just know this through TV, movies, or through talking with people. Countries around the world hate America. They don't like this place. They do business with it. They're able to make money. They're able to come here and experience different types of liberties and freedoms that they can't really experience in other places. Basically come here and be wicked. So that's not what this verse is talking about. It's not saying that they're going to be crying over Babylon because they feel sorry for her. They're going to be crying because they're not going to be making any more money off of this place. The destruction of America, Babylon the Great, is pretty much the end of this current world. With this place going down, these nations are going down, the kingdom of heaven is going to be established, and we're going to be in rulership. They're not going to be able to prosper like they're doing now. That's why they're going to be lamenting, and they're going to see the smoke because it's going to be broadcasted just like anything else that goes on in the world. You're going to have countries that still have access to the news, satellites transmitting, information about what happened. You're going to still have different militaries radioing to whatever command post saying what happened. People are going to know that Babylon the Great was destroyed, and the smoke is going to be in the air. Verse 10, standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. 1 hour. Verse 11, and the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise anymore. See, there's not going to be any more trade going on. Verse 12, the merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones and of pearls and of fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet and all fine wood and all manner vessels of ivory and all manner vessels of most precious wood and of brass and iron and marble and cinnamon and odors and ointments and frankincense and wine and oil and fine flour and wheat and beast and sheep and horses and chariots and slaves and souls of men. Because this place sells souls of men. It captures your soul. That's why the scriptures say, flee out of the midst of Babylon spiritually. Save every man his soul. Verse 14. And the fruits that thy soul lusted after are departed from thee, and all things which were dainty and goodly are departed from thee, and thou shalt find them no more at all. Verse 15. The merchants of these things which were made rich by her shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, because they're going to be afraid. Again, this is going to be made. America has been propped up, just like Romans chapter 9 tells you, for this very purpose have I raised thee up, speaking to Pharaoh, that his name might be declared. He's going to make an example. But the scriptures tell you this deliverance is going to be so great, it's going to trump everything that happened during the time of Egypt. People aren't going to even be mentioning Egypt anymore. Because the scriptures tell you in Jeremiah, what is it, 23, no longer are we going to say, I'm paraphrasing, no longer are we going to say the Most High liveth which brought us out of the land of Egypt, but the Most High liveth which brought up and led the children of Israel out of the north country. That's talking about North America, this place. We ain't going to talk about Egypt no more. We're going to talk about this deliverance. And why is it going to be so great? Because it's going to be, again, one, utterly destroyed. And you're going to have chariots delivering people. And it's going to be seen worldwide. Verse 16. And saying, alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. And that's just describing the glory of America. It describes the same. It describes the woman in Revelation chapter 17 as being decked in fine linen and purple and scarlet and gold. That's just showing you the exuberance that America has, in the world. Because even though the prestige of America is dwindling, people still look at America as that place. All right, verse 17. For in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught, and every shipmaster and all the company in ships and sailors and as many as trade by sea stood afar off, and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, what city is like unto this great city? That's why the Most High has built this country up to the level that it has. It could have taken America out a long time ago, but no, it wants America to be the hammer of the earth that it is. Great, powerful, the bully, making all the moves. As America goes, so goes the world. That's what the Most High wanted. Set this place up. So when he destroyed it, it's no doubt who destroyed it, because nobody can take this place down. Russia might have the capability of destroying it, but again, it'll be mutually assured destruction. Nobody can, destroy it the way the Most High is going to have it destroyed, or without the sanctions. Let me reword it. Nobody can destroy it on their own, because even Russia is still going to have those other nations that turn against America, Babylon the Great. Why? Because the Most High is going to put it in their hearts to do so. Where we at? Let's start at verse 18 again. And cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, what city is like unto this great city? And they cast dust on their heads and cried, and weeping and wailing, saying, alas, alas, that great city, wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea by reason of her costliness. For in 1 hour is she made desolate. It keeps on telling you in 1 hour it's going to be destroyed. And it's telling you again about the ships, because that is the trade. Any nation that was able to do trade through America, and even if it's not physical, commodities, trade through the stock market, through the changing of currency, that's still trade. That's how these countries are made, made to be rich. It's through America. Verse 20. Rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for the Most High hath avenged you on her. And at heaven is talking about Israel, us, the Israelites, because the kingdom of heaven is ours. We're rejoicing because once this place is destroyed, we want this place to be destroyed, because we want the kingdom of heaven. Who don't want the kingdom of heaven? So ask yourself, do you want the kingdom of heaven, or do you want Babylon the Great? Well, the kingdom of heaven cannot come until Babylon the Great is destroyed. So we want this place to be destroyed so we can inherit the kingdom. And ye holy apostles and prophets, for the Most High hath avenged you on her. Now, why is the Most High avenging the prophets on Babylon the Great? Because they're here. You're not virgin spirits. The prophets are reborn. We don't know who we are. And every prophet doesn't have a book in the Bible. You have plenty of prophets and apostles. Same thing with how can I say it? the spiritual aspect of Babylon the Great. That spirit is here. It's the spirit of ancient Babylon is the same spirit of current day America. The spirit of ancient Rome is the same spirit that is in America. The ancient spirit of Egypt is the same spirit that's in America. That's what makes this place so filthy, so wicked. It has all the witchcraft, all the sorceries of those past empires. It's a culmination of all of them. It's ancient, it's spiritual Egypt, it's spiritual Nineveh, it's spiritual Assyria, it's spiritual Babylon, it's spiritual Greece, and it's spiritual Rome. Verse 20 again, rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for the Most High hath avenged you on her. Verse 21, and a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, thus with violence shall that great city be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. America is going to be destroyed with violence because of the violence that America has done on the whole world. These other European nations as well, but again, Babylon the Great is the altar. This is Babylon the Great. Now, this is going into a past prophecy about Babylon. Verse 21. Let me read that again, then we'll go to Jeremiah. Verse 21. And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. And when I read this, you should understand how these prophecies work. So this is Jeremiah 51 and 59. Let me see if I'm gonna start here. Alright, yeah. So this is 59. The word which Jeremiah the prophet commanded Seraiah, the son of Neriah, the son of Maaseiah, when he went with Zedekiah, the king of Judah, into Babylon in the 4th year of his reign. And this Seraiah was a quiet prince. Verse 60. So Jeremiah wrote in a book all the evil that should come upon Babylon, because the Most High was telling him all the things that were going to happen to Babylon. Some of the things took place, but as far as the destruction, it was twofold. It was for the current Babylon at that time and for the future Babylon of this time. Let me read this verse 60 again. So Jeremiah wrote in a book all the evil that should come upon Babylon, even all these words that are written against Babylon. Verse 61. And Jeremiah said unto Seraiah, when thou comest to Babylon, and shalt see, and shalt read all these words. Verse 62. Then shalt thou say, O Yahweh, thou hast spoken against this place, to cut it off, that none shall remain in it, neither man nor beast, but that it shall be desolate forever. Verse 63. And it shall be, when thou hast made an end of reading this book, that thou shalt bind a stone to it, and cast it into the midst of Euphrates. Verse 64. And thou shalt say, thus shall Babylon sink, and shall not rise from the evil that I will bring upon her, and they shall be weary. Thus far are the words of Jeremiah. So the Most High had Jeremiah prophesy against this place, and he actually had him perform, or he actually told Jeremiah to tell Seraiah to perform an act that will be symbolic of what was going to happen to Babylon the Great. And what was that? To tie a stone around the book that he wrote and cast it into the river Euphrates. Why? Let's go back to verse 18, chapter 8, Revelation chapter 18, verse 21. And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. So let's read that again in Jeremiah 51. Jeremiah 51. And we'll just start at 62. Verse 62. Then shalt thou say, O Yahweh, thou hast spoken against this place. The Most High has spoken against it. We're just reading it. We're just professing it. To cut it off. It's going to be cut off forever. That none shall remain in it, neither man nor beast, but that it shall be desolate forever. And we understand what that means, because the beasts are going to be destroyed. The people are going to be destroyed. The buildings, the cars, everything that was made is going to be destroyed. But at some point, and it says it's going to be desolate forever. We know that no man is going to come back here, but we know at some point you are going to have creatures that come here. The earth and the islands going to be moved. The bittern, the owls. That's why we go through all these things. Verse 63. And it shall be when thou hast made an end of reading this book, and it's symbolic because this is the this is the end of Babylon the Great. This is the end of his story. This is the end of his story as far as ruling. Now, and I just have to make mention of that because in the kingdom, there's going to be a 1,000-year period. This is the first dominion where the other nations are going to be our captives. All nations, they're going to be our captives. But we're going to rule in righteousness. We're going to rule with a rod of iron. But it's not going to be the same level, or it's not going to be, we're not going to rule in wickedness the way Esau has ruled in wickedness, because they ruled in wickedness. Think about how they had us in slavery, butt breaking men in front of not only their families, but in front of all of the slaves. That's some wicked ass shit. Raping little girls and little boys in front of their families, splitting up the families, maiming the men or maiming the women, cutting off limbs and your private parts, whipping them for little things. Now we're gonna rule them with a rod of iron, but again, it's not gonna be in any wickedness. But the point I was making, we're gonna rule them, these other nations, for a period of 1,000 years, because we're going to be teaching them the law, statutes, and commandments. See, that they're going to be placing our inward parts, so we're not going to have to teach each other, but we're going to have to teach them, because we're going to be establishing the government, establishing the kingdom of heaven. Now, after that 1,000-year period of time, the rest of these nations, they're going to be able to go back to their lands and govern their own lands and their own people, still under the laws and still under us. They're just not going to be our captors. They're still going to be, our tributaries, but not our captors like we were captives. But Esau, Edom, after that 1,000-year period of time, they're going to be destroyed. They're going to be gathered and burned, pursuant to Obadiah 17 and 18. They're going to be destroyed, and rightfully so, because they can't be allowed to ever rise again. They're wicked. They are the wicked. We've read that in a few places. That's what the Most High created them for. He didn't create them to change. He didn't create them to learn how to be righteous. He created them to be the wicked. They're the villain in this story. You got to have a superb bad guy for a great story. And this is what the Most High has written. This is his story. This is his book. Verse 63 again. And it shall be when thou hast made an end of reading this book, because again, that's symbolic to the end of his rulership, the end of his story. Because once this chapter is over with, this world, this current age, once this chapter is finished, then the fun begins. The kingdom of heaven, rulership, authority, power, spiritual power, true power, that thou shalt bind a stone to it and cast it into the midst of Euphrates. So let's go back to Revelation 18 to finish this out. Verse 21 again. And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. So you should understand how those prophecies work. Verse 22. And the voice of harpers and musicians and of pipers and of trumpeters shall be heard no more at all in thee, and no craftsman, and whatsoever craft he be, shall be found any more in thee, and the sound of a millstone shall be heard no more at all in thee, and the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee, and the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. Sorcery never went away. When you hear about witchcraft and sorcery, when you hear about witchcraft, you think on these low-level witches, in these days. But there's high-level sorcery going on in the world. That's why everybody's so bugged the hell out. That's why everybody's falling for this Babylon juice. Anyway, verse 24. And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all that were slain upon the earth. Alright, so that was pretty much it. The Spirit was just on me to go over Revelation chapter 18. Hopefully the lesson was edifying. I'm always thankful when the Most High put the Spirit on me to do a lesson. So I'm going to say, all praise Yahweh, by Hashem Yahweh Shah, by Hashem Akakwadash. And until next time, Shalom.